love that response. So thanks a lot for the opportunity to give this talk, specifically on geologic processes that may be influencing vertical land motions in the Chesapeake Bay. So my group at Virginia Tech will be investigating these processes over the next 5 years in collaboration with the USGS, NGS, and Hampton University. So a little bit of background about the Chesapeake Bay from a tectonic perspective. The figure to the left is showing earthquakes that are from the National Earthquake Information Catalog. The color represents the depth, and orange are shallow earthquakes, so they only go down to about 33 kilometers. So in the Chesapeake Bay, which is outlined in red, we see there's very few earthquakes, and this is a compilation from 1960, so quite a few years of observations, and there's very few suggesting the Chesapeake Bay is not tectonically active. Some other evidence that the Chesapeake Bay is not tectonically active is that the figure to the right shows GPS velocities from a UNAVCO solution, and it indicates that the Chesapeake Bay moves rigidly with the broader North American plate. So that suggests the Chesapeake Bay is definitely not on a tectonic boundary, it's not on a subduction zone. If it were on a subduction zone, we would see active volcanism. So there's not expected to be like a plate boundary deformation across the Chesapeake Bay. So that's one thing that we're not expecting to see. Now, some motivation for this work is that there are some existing GPS measurements of vertical land motions. This is a study by Peltier et al. In 2015. The triangles represent the GPS station, and the colors are the vertical rate. So if it's green or purple, it's subsidence. If it's yellow or red or pink, it's uplift. So in this study, they do find one station that's uplifting at about 2 millimeters per year, and subsidence on the rate of 0.5 to 4 millimeters per year. A couple of years, or just the next year, Carragher et al. Published another study that has GPS estimates of vertical land motion, and they find all subsidence, so 1 to 2 millimeters per year, a little bit less than the previous estimates. And then a couple years later, Creamer et al. Calculate velocities, vertical land motion from a host of different stations, and they find uplifting sites in several areas at 2 to 3 millimeters per year, 0 vertical land motions at several locations, and then subsidence up to 5 millimeters per year everywhere else in the other locations. So this inconsistency has motivated a study to produce a new vertical land motion velocity solution. Again, this is with USGS, NGS, and Hampton University. And each of these stations that we've been measuring, the first measurement was in October, and you'll hear about this later. The red triangles represent deep rod benchmarks, and then the yellow triangles represent other types of monumentation. So as Tim Dixon said, you know, there's differences or potentially differences in the types of monumentations, so we'll be able to make some comparisons with this particular vertical land motion solution. So there's some motivation for the study, or for understanding the geologic processes that are or may be affecting the Chesapeake Bay. So I'll first talk about glacial isostatic adjustment. I know a lot of you are very familiar with this, but maybe some of you aren't. So there's basically two components to glacial isostatic adjustment that we want to keep in mind. The first is when the glacier exists. So when it's thick and there's a lot of mass, it depresses the lithosphere. And then underneath that, the asthenosphere, or so the more ductile mantle material, flows out from where the lithosphere is depressed. On the sides, there's floor bulges. So the lithosphere depresses and the outside of this region uplifts. So the second stage is when the glacier retreats. The lithosphere rebounds where it was originally depressed. The mantle flows back, or the asthenosphere flows back into the region where the lithosphere was depressed and pushed it out of the way, and then the floor bulges subside. Now, glacial isostatic adjustment has been attributed to the primary factor in explaining North American vertical velocities. This is a nice vertical velocity solution from Stella et al. In 2007. Yellow is subsidence, red is uplift, and there's very good reasons to attribute this vertical land motion to glacial isostatic adjustment because the Laurentide ice sheet extended down into parts of northern US on the order of 12 to 20,000 years ago. This is a figure modified from Dyke et al. Showing where the glaciers extended, and this is North America here, and this is Chesapeake Bay. The crosses represent the estimated areas where there's the forebulge. So Chesapeake Bay is in this region where we would expect to have subsidence as the glacier retreats. So I've done some initial estimates of glacial isostatic adjustment and the expected vertical land motions, and what we get, and this is from the ICE 6G model, so it's a model of the extent and the thickness of the Laurentide ice sheet. And so just from glacial isostatic adjustment, I find 1.5 to 2 millimeters per year. So that doesn't explain all of what's being measured with GPS. So another contribution that is often overlooked is dynamic uplift or subsidence from mantle flow. So this is a process that suggests, or we know that the lithosphere is coupled to the mantle below it. In a horizontal fashion, you get horizontal flow, it's coupled to the lithosphere, and you get movement horizontally of the lithosphere. Well, you also get that in the vertical direction. So there's vertical mantle tractions, and they can also influence vertical motions of the surface. So this is an example showing a cold part of the mantle subsiding or downwelling, and it can kind of pull down the surface. In contrast, if you have hot mantle material uplifting, it can push the surface up. So there's already some estimates or some suggestions that North America is undergoing dynamic uplift and subsidence. So beneath North America, there was, and it's currently in eastern North America, a slab, a subducted slab. It's called the Farallon slab. So this is a cross-section of seismic tomography. If it's blue or green, it means the seismic velocity speed up, and it's moving through an area that's denser or colder. So this green region is expected to be the subducted slab, so part of the lithosphere that's moving underneath the deeper parts of North America. So this can create downwelling mantle flow. This is 3 slices. The Chesapeake Bay is shown here in the red square. This is at about 1,500 kilometers, 1,600, 1,700 kilometers approximately. And the blue means downwelling, and the red means upwelling. So just beneath the Chesapeake Bay, we do have these regions of downwelling. And a study by Forte et al. Suggested that this deeper motion is in fact influencing vertical land motions in the US. Okay, so there's another type of mantle convection called lithospheric modulated convection. This is something my group does as part of our research. So lithospheric modulated convection implies that where you have deeper, thicker lithosphere, you have downwelling. Where you have thinner lithosphere, you have upwelling. This is a map of lithospheric thickness of the Chesapeake Bay here. If it's blue or black, you have thicker lithosphere. The green and yellows are thinner lithosphere. So we've done some initial calculations, and this lithospheric thickness does indeed produce downwelling beneath the Chesapeake Bay. It's on the order of 3 millimeters per year, that bullseye right there. So there is the possibility that this is actually causing a little bit of downwelling or subsidence. Okay, I'll just touch on sediment compaction. This is a geologic process, so I can't ignore it. And we've already heard a little bit about it today. So the basic idea of natural sediment compaction is that the clastic sediments, or mainly sand and clays in the Chesapeake Bay, they are initially laid down, and then as more layers are deposited on top of existing layers, pressure pushes the sediments together, they realign, and you get compaction. Now in the Chesapeake Bay, we know that there's sandy layers and there's clay lenses. So this is a nice figure from Eggleston and Pope in 2013, a geologic report. And so the blue regions are representing the aquifers. The gray are representing clay lenses or clay layers. As those aquifers are pumped, it releases pressure, and the clay layers also compress. So that's shown on the left. Okay, to summarize, I'm helping us get back on time. So the main geologic processes that I'm suggesting are affecting the Chesapeake Bay specifically are glacial isostatic adjustment, and that's kind of been well established. That is one of the factors affecting the region. And then we could have dynamic uplift and subsidence. So there is downwelling at the deeper levels and at the shallower levels beneath the Chesapeake Bay. And then we know there's sediment compaction happening. So there are some other factors that you may be aware of. There's the impact crater. So that happened 35 million years ago. That's a pretty long time ago. So it's not expected that the impact crater is still uplifting or subsiding. There's not any evidence that the impact crater has an effect on vertical land motions. So then there's a process called bedrock dissolution. This is the idea that bedrock, pieces of bedrock kind of dissolve as water infiltrates. And this happens in karst topography, or regions with a lot of sedimentary rock that have undergone, like they're cave systems. These are types of bedrock that have a lot of bedrock dissolution. But the bedrock in the Chesapeake Bay is crystalline. So this is a different type of composition that bedrock dissolution is not expected to happen. So another geologic effect that's unlikely happening. And then finally, on a regional scale, settling of fill and disturbed soils is not likely to also be an influence. Maybe locally, so maybe where there's infrastructure development, building practices, but these are not expected to happen like on the broad Chesapeake Bay region scale. Okay, so I will take questions.